takes on feminism. I am Jennifer Reeder, one of the hosts for today, along with Carrie Ruckel, who's the leader behind the camera, and we are feminists. I would like to thank you, the audience, for coming to this important set of discussions, and all the participants and the moderators, and especially Shannon Stratton and Abby Satinsky from Threewalls for providing the location for this event within Faith Wilding's remarkable exhibition. Tonight at Gallery 400, just down the street at UIC, Gallery 400 in South Peoria. Faith will be at the gallery at 8 p.m. Definitely reading from her memoir, but Lorelei says also maybe singing. So there's that. That's 8 p.m. tonight. Tracers Book Club is an all-inclusive social justice initiative made up of artists and educators and activists and otherwise fully engaged humans. We are all tracers. The discussions today will address, or so far, and including this one, will address feminism as it relates to issues of LGBTQ, this morning at 10, which was amazing, motherhood, which just happened, which was equally as amazing, and right now, race. These are very broad and, in fact, huge terms to deal with in an hour and a half, but it's a start. Tracers is dedicated to bringing it up, to calling it out. I predict that today's conversations will be provocative, smart, and emotional equally. This is an open forum, but a safe one. Let's talk about anything and everything. Let's exchange and embrace new forms of action, issue challenges and reciprocate promises. Let's be all in this together. Tracers, tracing. Sign up for our mailing list, which is out there. For more information about our events or gatherings, you can find us on Twitter and Tumblr and Instagram. And you have a Facebook page. We also have a closed Facebook group that you can just ask and anyone can join. It's more sort of like, it's a great forum, but it's not public. And don't forget your merch. So there's tons of free, well, not tons, but there's 3 different kinds of tracers merch. It's all free, so take what you want, prints, pencils, and cards. Each discussion will be about an hour of participant conversation, then about a half an hour of open discussion with you, the audience. This last discussion addresses issues of race and will be moderated by Mrs. Ferguson, who is the program coordinator at the Jane Addams Hull House Museum. Isis is a curator and cultural worker, and although a relatively new friend of mine, she's someone who I feel like I have known all my life. Do you feel like I didn't want to sound like the teacher said, but I have a Valentine. Hey, not any of that. But I do, right? Jane Addams Valentine. Oh. Really bad. Much more. We go all the way back. Yeah, no, I feel connected to you, you know? Okay, where was I? That's Valentine's Day. Right? Okay, so Isis will continue to say nice things about me. Introduce herself further, and then the panelists will introduce themselves. So thank you so much, and let's do this. Last thing. So after this one, there's also sort of a little, you can have a glass of wine if you like, if that's your thing, afterwards, and some coffee. So stay afterwards for, a short reception too to continue this conversation. Okay, now.
Thank you, Jenny. Lorelei Stewart was the moderator at the Motherhood panel right before this, and she started a really lovely tradition of introducing herself as a fierce feminist. So I am going to keep mine short and just say that I am a fierce feminist also. And our panel keeps growing. So we're gonna introduce ourselves, and then I'm gonna jump into an intro, and then we will start our conversation.
We weren't given any guidelines how to introduce ourselves, so my name is Kina. I'm an artist, and I'm a professor at DePaul University where I teach art, media, and design, primarily studio art, but also critical mixed race study and Asian American studies. And I recently co-authored a book called War Baby Love Child, Mixed Race Asian American Art.
Hi everybody, my name is Gaspar. I come from a family of strong feminists, and I am an artist. I'm from Chicago, from a little village, La Vita, on the west side. A lot of my projects are based on that part of Chicago, and I also teach at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
My name is Indira Johnson, and I'm an artist and a sculptor. And my focus has been on peace was, and actually it was the project, even though I was nominated as one of the 6 Chicagoans of the Year by Chicago Magazine in 2013, which I think is a testimony to art and to public art.
Hi, my name's Alberto Aguilar. I want to say it all, but I don't want to waste your time. My practice, I look for opportunities to integrate my daily life with my practice. A lot of the times that happens at home. I teach at Harold Washington College, which is one of the city colleges of Chicago. I was born in Chicago, and I've lived here since then.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexandria Eregbu. I just recently received my BFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. I like that Maria mentioned that she came from a strong family of feminists. I similarly come from a family predominantly full of women and phenomenal women at that. So I like to mention that too. I'm an artist, performer, curator, programmer. You can read more about me in the little bio description, I guess.
Hi, I'm Sohelia Azadi. I'm a white female artist from Iran. I was born and raised in the most religious city of Iran.
My name is Nick Kay. I was actually on the panel earlier, the LGBTQ panel, and I was asked to join this one. So, hey. I'm from the Bronx, New York. I'm living here in Chicago. I'm an artist, a teacher, organizer. I make a lot of work around movement and the reclamation of like identity and sanity as like a Black, queer, trans person. And I'm currently working on a full-length show that is about discovering my gender and sexual identity through the voguing ballroom scene.
I'm Larson. I am a photographer and a writer. I teach photography at Ohio University. I too am a last-minute add-on. I too am a fierce feminist, and I am raising a fierce feminist as well. I have recently written a book called Hidden Mother, which is about the 19th century studio practice of concealing mothers to make portraits of children. And the book is instead of practice of the hidden mother, acts as a kind of frame to talk about the adoption of the daughter.
Thank you. So 2 matters of housekeeping. If you can't hear any of us, please just tell us to speak louder. I know it was really hard in the last panel. And also, as people are coming in, if you can let them know, if they don't care about sitting on the floor, there's plenty of space up here. So you're going to hear from me a lot in the beginning, and then I promise you I'm going to fade in the back and let these experts speak. So we are the Race and Feminism panel. We're the 3rd installment in today's long conversations convened by Tracers and hosted by Threewalls. Other conversations today delved into feminism and motherhood, feminism and frameworks rooted in an LGBTQ analysis. We want and expect to enliven our session with dimensions drawing from conversations that preceded us. So if you are a part of those sessions, we are calling on you to bring those voices into the room. Race and feminism, as Jenny mentioned, is an unimaginably large undertaking to explore in an hour-and-a-half time frame. So we're not going to try to do sweeping historical overviews of various racial and gender justice movements. What we can do is hear from this 6, 7, now 8 perhaps, and growing group of individuals who through curating, through teaching, performing, or creating are grappling with gender, race, power, and privilege in their work and their various practices. To make the task of tackling race and feminism seem a bit more manageable, we've focused and organized our session into 3 sections. First, we will talk about the roots and foundations. Second, we will move into process, practice, and product. And thirdly, we will close out with challenges and promise, and then end with an activity with all of you. We're going to spend the shortest portion of the session asking panelists to locate themselves within a tradition of feminism and give us a sense of how, or even if, feminism fits into their artistic identity. Then, we hope to spend a reasonable amount of time looking at the interplay of race and gender in each person's practice, whether that intersection is felt in how they go about their work, their strategies in making or teaching, or in the works that they produce. Our final portion will allow us to think expansively as a collective. We'll use this time to dig into the negotiations of race with other positionalities. Ending on a note of wonder and thrill, we'll discuss the liberatory promise of an anti-racist feminism and art. I assume that there's a good chance none of us mean the same thing when we talk about feminism. There are ideological differences and nuances within a larger framework aimed at securing political, economic, and social equality between men and women all along the gender spectrum. Some of us on this panel and you in the audience may be rooted in global feminism, post-colonial feminism, Chicana feminism, transnational feminism, critical race feminism, that's me, black feminism and womanism, multiracial feminism, or Marxist feminism. So as we proceed, I want us to try to keep in mind that we're not in any way operating from a single or shared definition, so that when you're asking questions, people might need to unpack their words so that the conversation can be fruitful. So to open, I did want to reveal a little bit about myself and situate myself in the feminist tradition and explain the lineage of thought that I find peace in, and then we're going to move on and everyone's going to do that. I'm going to read a statement from the Combahee River Collective as an explanation of how I came to name what I have lived and known as a young woman of color. I first read this as an undergrad in one of my first women's studies classes, which I know is super cliche, but that is how I came across it. The Combahee River Collective was a black feminist lesbian organization active in Boston from 1974 to 1980. They're perhaps best known for developing the Combahee River Collective, a key document in the history of contemporary black feminism. I'm just going to give you a few tidbits from that to sort of explain my vantage point and kind of why I'm asking the questions that I'm asking. So this is from, I think, around 1978. We are actively committed to struggling against racial, sexual, heterosexual, and class oppression, and see as our particular task the development of integrated analysis and practice, based upon the fact that the major systems of oppression are interlocking. The synthesis of these oppressions creates the conditions of our lives. Our politics initially sprang from the shared belief that black women are inherently valuable, that our liberation is a necessity, not as an adjunct to someone else's, made because of our need as human persons for autonomy. Our politics evolved from a healthy love of ourselves, our sisters, and our community, which allows us to continue our struggle. We believe that sexual politics under patriarchy is as pervasive in black women's lives as are the politics of class and race. We also often find it difficult to separate race from class, from sex oppression, because in our lives, they are most often experienced simultaneously. We need to articulate the real class situations of persons who are
but were still playing roles of like this like super normative roles. So it was the queerness that helped me understand.
I grew up in a family of women that had a great deal of ambivalence about their own power, and thus would have never dreamed of being identified as feminist. And when I went to college, and I had my first kind of formal introduction to feminism and feminist critical theory, it was kind of like coming home, right? And what was most powerful for it is not only did I have a kind of set of tools to understand my own experience, but I also kind of immediately felt a connection to a kind of legacy. And that for me was just hugely important in terms of my own political education, my own education as an artist, and essentially sort of how I kind of went forth into the world. So my daughter, which I think Jennifer sort of was seeing me as some kind of like little bridge between motherhood and race, but I'm a single parent, and I adopted my daughter from Ethiopia just 4 years ago. And the book that I wrote is in some ways to try and come up with a model of thinking about maternity and working through certain ideas, like how adoption in some ways could be emblematic of maternity rather than a certain kind of biological model. And in that, think about what it means. I guess the best way I can put it, and these aren't my words, like the idea of queering maternity, and like rather than the sort of model of we have children and our children have children and all that, but like the sort of the idea of a lateral affiliation. It's like, you're my daughter, and that's, you're the one that I love. And so that is sort of, and in terms of, I know you have a very specific question, but
You're actually on target.
that, and and I can tie it like very directly to an experience I had at 18, where I was like, oh, okay, it's not about where I came from, it's about like who I'm going to find out in the world, and how these sort of questions that I hold very near and dear to me about how to be a community and how to live in the world in a meaningful way are, for me, why I chose adoption.
Okay, so yeah, I'm kind of naive in the topic, but I feel like I'm figuring out along the way. And I think I could just list a couple facts, and that will help you understand where I'm coming from. I'm Mexican American. My father was born here in Texas, and he went to Mexico to visit a friend, and he met my mother, who was like 15 years younger. She was serving because her mother had passed away, and he ended up marrying her, bringing her over here. We owned the first Mexican grocery store in Cicero, Illinois, and she would tend the store, and he would go off to work, but she would also take care of all of us. So she would do all the traditional, she would have all the traditional motherly responsibilities, but then also have to take care of us, and then take care of him as well. And he was very, after we closed down the store, she went to work at a factory also in Cicero, and then she went on to work at the post office, and he was always very supportive of her going to work, but I feel it was more because he wanted more money. But so he was always, sort of good at letting her go to work, but he also still expected her to put on the traditional motherly responsibilities. Anyway, so he actually retired early, like at 50-something, and he spent, his office was the kitchen. He still is always in the kitchen. And I took on part of her mode of being, where she does sort of everything, but I also took on some of his I guess I inherited something from him as well. But I would say that I'm not as I don't expect so much from my wife, but there are things that I really appreciate that she does that helps me do my job better.
So we started with our legacies to kind of understand the communities that have built us, and how we then take that and go out into the world and choose the projects that we do, because art is about choices that we make. So I want to move from the traditions that we sort of were rooted in into conversations about your artistic process and your practice. We don't have to continue. We can do popcorn, we can mix it up. We're the last group today, we can be creative. I want to ask you, and I'm hearing the words that you're saying, and that feminism is not necessarily a term that feels authentic to you sometimes, or it's just, it lived in you at all times, so it's not something that you had to reach out for. So I'm going to change the wording in this question. It used to be, how do feminism and race come together or not in your projects? And so I guess I would instead ask, how do gender and race come together in your projects or not?
I think about, since I don't necessarily think about myself first making in the studio when I make feminist art, I think that when it goes out in the world, because a lot of the things I start with as a painter are autobiographical, people will read race and gender into my work. I also love color. I love the decorative. I use textile things. I don't care. I do things about my grandmother or my great-grandmother and so on and so forth. But those are seem to be read always, what's so personal? Because nobody could possibly see the universal, because these are stories about women of color. But why can't it be the universal or something, So in some ways, I feel like that can happen when things get read or flattened and not really fully explored. I have a show that's a solo show opening next week in Memphis, at the University of Memphis, called Blue Hawaii. I've been working on this for quite a few years. It started out originally at Woman Made Gallery here in Chicago, a little show called Sugar, where I went back to Hawaii with my dad and tried to gather stories from the second generation immigrants from Japan who came over as sugarcane field workers. And I wanted to find out what their life story was like. And specifically, I was hunting for ghost stories. And so in the course of that, I learned so much about their lives, things I didn't expect. I expected them, they come as picture brides, and I expected them to be like, woe is me. But they were really tough women. I found out my great-grandmother was like bootlegging and all this stuff. And so the success I have today is built on something illegal, Right, so it kind of was wonderful to debunk all those myths. And then through the course of that, realizing that, I grew up in an all-white community, and this process of assimilation is actually part of this huge wave after World War II, things that we needed to do to survive and move on, and are disconnected from our family in Okinawa, and so it was a process of reconnecting. So it's stories about women, but it's stories about all of us together, and you can't separate that out. But I think the aesthetics that I just love can easily be read as something that's very, very feminist. The access, decorative, color. But it's not surface.
I think one thing that I briefly mentioned to Maria earlier is that a lot of us actually here happen to work in performative practices. And so I'm really interested in how sort of that almost hyper-awareness of our bodies in that way kind of relates to the question that you're asking about how race and gender intersect. For me, it's very hard for me to kind of remove myself from it, because I feel like physically, visually, I embody my race and my perceived race and gender every single day. But I would be really interested to hear like what other people have to say about that as people who work in modes of performance.
I can speak a little bit to that. So yeah, I'm also, when you pointed that out, that was really interesting. I mean, I work mostly with in collaboration, so both with artists and non-artists, so anywhere from violence prevention workers to teachers to young people at the local high school. And I think for me what I'm most interested in is the ways in which we can use a feminist pedagogy and apply that in teaching and in community projects, using criticality, thinking about solidarity, and also lifting up local heroes. That where I work, it's really culturally specific. On the west side, there's North Lawndale, South Lawndale. So South Lawndale, Little Village, is mostly Mexican American. North Lawndale is mostly African American. And so I think it's really interesting to think about ways in which we can create spaces for different kinds of people, different kinds of experts to share and to use that kind of way of thinking for programming or for creating projects that are revealing something about I don't know, space or community work. And I think that a lot of it comes with performance as collaboration, or the ways in which maybe it even negotiates performativity, and the ways in which bodies collaborate together is something that I'm really fascinated in, and that's something that, and it's something that is so, you go in with a plan, but it continuously is shaped on its own, and you have to just let it unfold. You can't really foresee what the end result is, and that sometimes is something really scary, but also really powerful and really compelling.
I also do performances, and usually my works are based on my own experiences as a woman, and specifically as a Muslim-born woman who lived under theocracy. And I wasn't concerned with race until I came to Chicago, and people were talking to me, and they were like, "So you, as a woman of color," and I was like, "I'm sorry, I'm Caucasian." And then I had to explain, okay, I'm from Vietnamese, and this is the history, and these people are Caucasian, and I know I'm not white, so this label of being Caucasian is like pretty complicated now for me. So for me as an artist, race has become part of my work now, and my concern that I'm trying to figure out how I can bring it into my performances more than what I used to before, which was mostly gender and religion.
As someone who came to performance through theater, I was trained as an actor, I've always been really aware of the audience and the viewer, and was trained to play, as a young Black actor, the roles you can play, right? So role is, and gender is very set, right? You're like, okay, sign, sex at birth, female, you're a girl, you're Black, you can play Tituba in the Crucible, and that. So you have something to esteem to, these specific things. So as I started to learn about performance art and think about it as a space of autonomy, and where I could define what I wanted and how I wanted to be seen. The audience and the viewer, I was very hyper aware that the audience and the viewer has been trained to see me in certain ways, and that I could play with that conceptually for the benefit of the message or whatever, if I'm working politically, to comment on how we are forced into these categories. So I think the medium of performance has been really liberating for me, to be able to play on the fact that we've already been trained to categorize ourselves and each other in these specific ways, and to think about also how my body is seen, because I do movement-based work. So how my body is seen, and like versus how I like see my body and identify my body, and like that struggle that can exist, and how that can be a great place to start a conversation about body modification and trans identity as well in terms of gender, right? Because like, you know, people see breasts, like, to be honest, right? Like, you see I'm dancing, and there's like breasts, and there's like this sort of like, oh, this person's body is identified with this sort of identity, but how to like push that conversation in movement and within the art space.
There was a point in my early career that I decided that I wasn't going to talk about race in my work. Like, I would still use things in my work that had to do with my heritage, but I decided early on that in my work I was going to talk about race. And the other thing that I decided was I was doing murals when I was working at the College of DuPage, is that I wasn't that interested in that format, that medium, which is, I guess, very traditional to Mexican public art. So I also decided to drop that format, because there was this feeling that I could easily become sort of enslaved by that, and I didn't want to. I needed a little more freedom, so I let those things go. The other thing I wanted to say is that there's been several occasions that I have been, my work has been called feminist, but that also is unintentional. It's not something that I consciously set out to be called to do.
Can you talk about, before we started, I think Maria mentioned your work in the domestic space.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that as a gendered notion? It's implicit, but it's not outright talking about gender, but it's the domain, the private space.
Yeah, I mean, and I said this earlier on, like, I make work sort of in the thick of my life, wherever that is, whether I'm at school, whether I'm meeting with another artist, but most of the time it happens at home. So I think of home things as pliable material to make work, not just the furniture, but also my interactions with the kids. Not really, it's funny, it never really crosses the relationship I have with my wife, but it never goes in that direction. But yeah, I think of the domestic setting as something pliable to be played with, and that's why it enters my work.
Since I've talked about peace and nonviolence, the issue that has come up for me has been domestic violence. And so I did a project with Aguilar, which is a South Asian shelter in Chicago, which is open to everybody, but it is specifically, some of the practices are for South Asian, as far as language, as far as food. And so I've worked with them, and my interest has been in culture. How does culture and the myths and stories that have been handed down to generations, how does that influence how men and women see each other? And does that contribute to domestic violence? And that was the issue that we investigated and had a number of shows that traveled through the U.S. Harvard, it was in Minneapolis. But then subsequently, just last year, because of the issue of, I'm sure everyone is aware of that horrible rape that took place in New Delhi last year around this time, which resonated across the world. And since I go back every year to Mumbai and to that particular Golibad slum that my family still works in, I decided to do a project of domestic violence there, but on very different circumstances, because while here women do have options as to where they, whether it's the state or other people, especially in the slums, there is no other option. If there has been beating you, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't even go to the police. And so, how do you negotiate that power that someone else holds over you? How do you bring people together to be able to say that, okay, there might not be that power, but there is other power and strength. And so that was a very, empowering project that was done with these women, and it was empowering for me as well to be able to see how they saw that their strengths could contribute to some way to deal with some of that abuse that they suffer. Race has not been part of my work per se, except in some of the arts education projects that I've done. Because I started in an arts education organization called Shakti Foundation for Peace, which worked in schools, public schools in Chicago and Evanston. And the mission was to teach nonviolence through the arts. And so invariably, depending on what the curriculum was in the class that we were teaching, race would come into the picture. But it wasn't the focus of any of the projects that I've dealt with. I've encountered, as a woman of color, both very surprisingly in India as well as here. I'm married to a Swedish man, and when we first got married, he came to India to get married. There was a lot of abuse that I suffered because of the fact that he's interracial. So you walk down the street and people are horrible, really gross names. And so it sort of is an eye-opener. It wasn't something that I focused on, but it made me much more aware of race and how complex that issue was whether you are in this country or in any other country, and how the differences are in the perceptions.
So while our conversation is clearly race-centric, Tracers in setting up these three conversations has acknowledged that there are excluded voices within the conversations that try to bring to the forefront conversations about motherhood and bring to the forefront conversations about LGBTQ communities. I'm sort of wondering, to round out the conversation, what sort of other positionalities or narratives do we need to be weaving into our feminist practice?
I think it's something that all day today hasn't necessarily been hit on the head, but I think talking about gender, you mentioned it in your opening, the spectrum, so, gender not just as like male or female, but like the myriad of identifications and ways in which you can live your life within our society, and that like feminism can exist on that spectrum and does exist on that spectrum, I think is extremely important, because I think when you enter the conversation usually about feminism, we go directly to that binary of like, what do women do? What do men do? And like, women should have the opportunity to do whatever they want. And it's like, actually, we should all have the opportunity, regardless of our identification, to do whatever we want. And we should definitely talk about systems of power that have particularly like privileged certain identities over other identities. But our ideas of womanhood and femininity need to be expanded beyond like a cisgender experience, a cisgender being like a person who is born or is assigned a sex at birth and identifies in their expression and identity with that sex. So yeah, if you didn't know what cisgender is.
I feel like this might not be related, I feel like in the West there are so much talk and less but maybe after, like, because talking does raise awareness, but what happens after you leave this place? What do you do? This matters to me so much that, because I see like back home, thinking of all women, they don't gather and talk about these things, but they do act of what they believe in, and I feel like that's missing here. And like that, I don't mean that you take on a huge project. No, baby, you can just help your neighbor keeping her kid for 1 hour so that she can take a shower. You know, that's a feminist act.
I think kind of, well, I've known about this conversation for a minute now, and consequently, sort of like in my studio practice, it's forced me to think about maybe some things I hadn't been considering before. And I know, like, as a Black female feminist, a lot of the conversations that I see that want to be raised not only in my work but in other modes of visual representation of Black females and popular culture, you know, the first things that want to be addressed are, you know, gender and then also sexuality. And so for me, I'm really sort of more aware now of the things that I'm not seeing exposed, and sort of like what it means to be a Black woman. For example, like I also have a very strong background in athleticism, not only with my father, but also a huge part of my life growing up was rooted in that, and I still love playing basketball, like whenever, wherever. If you tell me, let's go to a court, I'm down. I also am like really interested in sort of seeing more people, and myself included, sort of, I think earlier in the womanhood panel, someone mentioned how there's a stigma around talking about motherhood, and I would love to see more artists sort of address how these female figures, you know, how your grandmother sort of like influenced your work, how your aunt, your sister. I think that's really important, and it's something that I am working. So this is kind of like in response to your challenge, you know. Something that I work in, I want to work to do more